Okay, before we go any further, let's save our work. Please go up to File, go to Save Scene or Save Scene As, and then you just need to name the scene. We're going to call this, and let's call this Level 1. So, what is a scene? Well, I've already kind of tipped my hand by calling it Level 1. What Unity does is it breaks up an application into related functions. So if you think of an old school side-scrolling shooter, each level would be a scene. If you think of a survival horror game, the old ones where you walk through a door, it loads, and you have a room. If you walk through another door, it has to load again. So each room would be a scene. So it's a collection of functionality that is usually in a similar proximity, shall we say. A main menu and option menus, those could be interconnected scenes. Ending credits could be a scene. So it's basically a way of breaking up the application into chunks. And with that out of the way, let's continue. So we said that we're going to click on a crate and then click on a hamburger, and the cheese will appear on that hamburger. So what we need to do is we're going to create a game master object. And that game master object is going to have a new script attached to it. That is going to be really a catch-all for certain functions and overall game flow, as opposed to a function that is associated with just one object. So let's go to game object, create empty, and we'll just call this game master. Or GM, let's just call it GM. And unlike other objects, it really doesn't matter where it is. You can move it out of the way if you want. And it's really just going to hold a catch-all script. So let's right-click, create, C#, and we'll call this game flow. You could use a game flow script for maybe certain score functionality, loading of new scenes, things like that. We'll take GM, and we'll attach game flow to it. Now let's go ahead and open up game flow. At the moment, there's not going to be much in it. Basically, we're just going to use it to declare what's known as a static variable. It's a variable that you want to have accessible anywhere in the application. Zoom in a little bit. So, public static, and we'll call this, we'll make it a string because it's going to be text. And we'll call this place cheese, and we'll start it off set to n for now. Basically, this is going to have two values. It's going to be no when you haven't clicked on cheese. It's going to be yes when you click on cheese, and then when you place the cheese, it'll go back to no. That's going to be the sole function of this variable. Now, some will say, well, why didn't you just use a Boolean for this? And that's because very often I find that what I think is going to be yes or no winds up having other values, and then you have to go back and recode everything. Well, not everything, but you have to recode how that variable works. So out of habit, I just don't use Booleans because of that limited functionality. Okay, so what we do now is now we're going to need a script for this. So just as we created one for the burger crate, we're going to create one for the cheese crate. So create C# cheese crate. And again, you could use one script to manage all the crates, but what happens is right now, let's open up that script. Right now, let's go to the burger crate. This just says on mouse down. If I use the same script for every crate, I would then have to check in the on mouse down if name of the object is burger crate, if name of the object is cheese crate. I haven't named them that yet, but that's what I'd have to do. I'd have to actually look at the name of the object being clicked on. This way you don't have to. So again, 6 one way, 1/2 dozen the other, whatever you find easier to troubleshoot. This way each object has its own script. It's a very simple game, so it's not like you're going to have hundreds of scripts. Whatever works for you. As I always say, I'm not saying this is the best way to do it. I'm just saying this is a way to do it and my explanation as to why. That way, if you're trying to troubleshoot this script, this object, you go right to its script, which I say this object's functionality. Okay, so what do we want to do? Well, same type of functionality. So we're going to do so similar to this, on mouse down, but we're not going to instantiate the cheese object when you click on it. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to set this value to yes, and that's it. Since that variable is declared in game flow, we need to say, okay, in game flow, find a certain variable, and that variable was place cheese, and it gets set equal to y, or yes. So, quick recap. Clicking on this actually instantiates the object. Clicking on this simply sets a variable to yes. We then have to check for the clicking on the hamburger to see, we have to click on the hamburger to see which one is being clicked on. Right now there's only one, but it will scale out as we build the game. So that means the burger patty needs to have a script attached to it. And we'll call this patty underscore con for control. And we open that up. So now for pattycon, what we want is the hamburger object needs to be made aware of the cheese, and the hamburger object will instantiate the cheese. So similar to what we did before, where we made the crate, for want of a better term, aware using a variable, we're going to do the same thing with the hamburger itself. So let's drag and drop the patty script onto the hamburger. And then we will do public transform, and we'll call this cheese obj. And over here, there's the cheese object. So now you just have to take the cheese prefab and put it there. So now just as the crate is aware, for want of a better term, of the hamburger is then aware of the cheese. Going forward, we'll probably do the same thing with the other toppings as well. The hamburger will also be aware of like the ketchup and any other topping, and we'll probably rinse and repeat that functionality. That way when you click on the hamburger, it then places the other topping as well. Now, what we're going to do is we want this to get instantiated when you click on the hamburger. So we need another on mouse down. So maybe this should be called the on mouse down tutorial. And this is where you want the cheese to get instantiated. Now, as I said before, when you use the instantiate command, you have a couple different ways of declaring a position. For the burger crate, we actually spelled out the 3 coordinates. Here, we're simply going to say use the coordinates of another object. So instantiate in this case, it's the cheese we're instantiating. And instead of the coordinates, we're going to use the coordinates from an object. So we just put in that object there. So we say transform.position. In other words, what is the position of the object this is attached to? Remember, the script isn't attached to the cheese. The script is attached to the hamburger. So what's the position of the hamburger? And then we want to use the cheese object's rotation. Oops, sorry. Now this part should look familiar because what we're going to do is just as we had to add a collider to this, we need to add a collider to that. So that's why I mentioned at the beginning of the video that technically I probably should have added that stuff first and then multiplied it out, but it's just as well. Sometimes it's good to see the repetition. So add component. So we have the second crate or whatever crate you want selected. Do add component. We do physics and we do box collider. And this time I'm actually going to look and you can see it's really tiny. So it's a little bit small to grab the dots, so we'll make this a little bit bigger first. Okay, so we click on the Edit Collider to get the dots. I can see there's one back there, so we pull that one in. And there's one there, I believe, so we pull that up. And again, it's not like it's a fighting game or something where collision is really, really important as long as this doesn't overlap that. Like we've got a little bit of space here where it's possible to click on the wrong thing. So we may find that we need to shrink these crates a little bit. Or again, since this is cheese, we might not put the crate here. We might shrink the crate and put it like over here. And the functionality would still work because the clicking on the crate is based on, well, should I say this functionality is based on a click, not a position. So I can actually push this over here, make it smaller, and it would still work. Okay, so this now has its collider. So I believe we have everything that we need. Actually, this crate doesn't have the cheese crate script. Now it does. And as we said, all the cheese crate does is when you click on it, it sets the place cheese variable to yes. So this has a collider. It's got the script. So when we click on it, place cheese should be changed to yes. We click on the hamburger. The hamburger has the cheese object and it has the script that says to instantiate the cheese there. So I think everything is in place now. Now, one thing is when we click on this, there's no visual indicator that's working. So that's the kind of thing that you want to do for your player. You want something to indicate that a function has happened. So maybe the mouse should change to a slice of cheese, that kind of thing. So we click on this, actually. Let's click on the hamburger. We already clicked on this, so that should still be set to yes. Didn't work. I think I know why. Because the hamburger itself does not have a collider. So physics, box collider. I'm going to put this into the environment just for a minute so I can see the size of the collider. So there's the, you can see the rectangle around it. So let's try this one more time. We click, the burger appears. We click here, and then we click here, and there we go. The cheese worked. So again, I think the reason why the cheese fits well is because when I designed them, this cheese was above the patty. So what happened is that its control point is lower. So, or should I say the control point is below the cheese itself, and therefore it pushes the cheese up. But again, that's really a graphic design issue, and that's really a separate tutorial. So I think that gets us to where we want to be. And so as not to dive into a whole new topic, let's actually make the change that we said about rather than this being a full crate down here, we're going to shrink it and put it up here so it's like a little cheese dispenser. And it'll demonstrate that the physical location of this is irrelevant, that the functionality of this is based on the click, not based on its location. So let's take this and we'll call this cheese DISP for dispenser. I can't think of a better name at the moment. Sorry, it's kind of early in the day. So we select it and we move it up here, move it over here. And since it's in the distance, that alone makes it look smaller, but we will shrink this a bit. So what we'll do is we'll once again go into, well, actually we can't change the underlying crate because then they would all change. So we do have to deal with the size of this. Unfortunately, the scale number here are really tiny to begin with. Let's see if we can just drop this. That's not bad. So 0.3. Again, depending how you make yours, your number might be entirely different. Let's try 2. 2 looked good, actually. 2. 2. And now we can take this one, move it over. And so now this isn't quite so crowded. This one was clipped off a little bit to begin with anyways. All right, let's line this up a bit. So let's just zoom around. And again, when you're doing this, this isn't moving the camera, at least not the game camera. This is just kind of moving whatever you want to call it, the director's camera. And we're just going to kind of line up these edges a little bit better. And then maybe up here will be like a ketchup and mustard bottle or something. And just to make it really clear what this is, let's go ahead and grab a cheese. And we will put it here. Now we are going to have to make a change, I think. Let's see what script is attached to the cheese, if any. And let's shrink this one. So now you have like a slice of cheese in here. So the cheese has a box collider. So that will remove from this one because we don't want people to be able to click on this specific object. So again, differentiating between the prefab and a single instance. So we don't need a box collider. I think that's it. Make sure we didn't break this one. That looks good. And then we'll just run this one more time. Also, the box collider, I think since it's on top of this, wherever the cheese was, you wouldn't be able to click because it wouldn't detect the box. So we click on the hamburger, click here, and it still works. Perfect. So again, we are going to want to make a change so as that when you click on this, it's obvious that you have a piece of cheese, like maybe change the cursor, but changing cursor is in itself a tutorial. So for now, just keep that in mind that you want to always give that feedback to the user that they're doing something, that they're in mid task. And maybe for now we could just make this glow, like put a particle system here or something, because that's a main task. That's a key functionality, is making the hamburger right. So if you make the wrong thing, then you have a problem. Okay, so I think in the next video what we'll do is we will add the bun so that when you click on, say, this bin, the bun appears, and then we'll be able to move the bun and the cheese over here. Now, I was toying with the idea of adding ketchup in this video, but probably you wouldn't add ketchup on the grill. Certainly don't want to offend any cooks out there. So what we'll do is the ketchup will add that functionality once it's over here. But it's going to be the same thing where you got to click on the ketchup and then you click on the hamburger. It's just the hamburger will be here. Okay, so I think that does it for this video. I hope everyone's enjoying this. I hope you're finding it useful. And we'll go out a few more videos and then I'll probably open it to questions because we're getting close to having the core functionality in place. We still need to, like I said, add the buns and have the hamburger appear in more than just one location. So we have to add an inventory system to these two objects. And then the other thing that we have to do is we actually have to have people appear at the top and request things. So I might take a shortcut and the people might just be 2D images, which is fine. 2D can be interlaced with 3D all the time. If you think of some like the Japanese RPGs and strategic RPGs like Disgaea, they have 2D imagery in 3D environments all the time. So that should do it for this one.